When a millionaire threw a lavish party to belittle Steve Harvey and Marjorie Bridges, he never imagined his own secrets would be laid bare before the guests. As laughter turned to gasps, a single revelation shattered his entire empire. What happened next would haunt him forever. In the affluent neighborhood of Crystal Springs, James Thornton was a name associated with power, wealth, and, unfortunately, arrogance. One could see him walking his golden retriever, Bentley, while wearing a tailored suit that could easily cost the average person a month's salary. His stunning mansion was the crown jewel of the community, drawing envious glances from his neighbors. Yet, beneath that shiny exterior, James was harboring secrets that would soon come crashing down like a house of cards. Steve Harvey, the beloved comedian and television host, lived just a few blocks down with his wife, Marjorie Bridges. They had recently moved into the neighborhood, hoping to enjoy the quieter pace of life. The couple exemplified warmth and generosity, drawing in friends and neighbors with their charm. However, James viewed them as intruders in his territory. To him, they were simply a lesser couple, overshadowing his superiority and success. When James learned that Steve and Marjorie were planning a gathering for their close friends, he decided to throw an extravagant party of his own, going all out to flaunt his wealth and belittle the newcomers. "I'll show them who runs this place," he smirked to himself, as he arranged for a live jazz band, gourmet catering, and an extravagant guest list filled with local elites. The invitations were sent out with a flourish, making it clear that this was no ordinary get-together. It was a spectacle. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your comment. And there's something very important. Click the hype button. This helps a lot to deliver this content to more people. It's quick, but it makes all the difference. As the party approached, the tension in the air grew palpable. James's guests arrived in waves, donning designer outfits, their laughter echoing through the grand halls of his home. He held court in the center of the gathering, recounting exaggerated tales of his business triumphs, throwing pointed glances in the direction of Steve and Marjorie, who had decided to join the festivities. Unbeknownst to James, his relentless mockery was only fueling the couple's resolve to show grace under pressure. "Look at that couple trying so hard to fit in," he snickered to his friend Mark. "They think they belong here." Mark merely chuckled, but inside, he began to sense that this night might lead to trouble. As the night wore on, the atmosphere shifted when James, feeling emboldened, made a toast meant to humiliate Steve and Marjorie. "To the newcomers, may they find their way back to the real world," he declared, raising his glass high, expecting laughter in return. Instead, the room fell silent, the guests exchanging uneasy glances as the couple processed the slight. But Steve, ever the comedian, leaned into Marjorie and whispered something that made her chuckle, defying James's intent. And so, tension simmered beneath the surface as the party continued. James felt a slight unease creeping into his confidence, but brushed it aside, focusing instead on his own self-importance. Little did he know, his facade was cracking, and beneath it lay a truth he had carefully concealed. As the night progressed, whispers of discontent began to spread like wildfire. Guests unwittingly compared their experiences with James's behavior towards Steve and Marjorie, with their own past experiences of feeling belittled. The jovial atmosphere James had envisioned began to wane, replaced by an undercurrent of disapproval and unrest. In the quiet corners of the lavish mansion, a tension grew, an ever-present reminder that the night was far from being the triumph James had envisioned. Secrets had a way of surfacing, and he was about to learn that revenge could come from the most unexpected places. Unbeknownst to him, an old friend had come to the party with a grudge, someone who possessed the power to expose the millionaire's hidden debts and scandalous dealings. James's empire was on the brink of collapse, and the very guests he tried to impress were beginning to see through his bravado. James Fuller stood at the center of his lavish mansion, the room awash in glittering chandeliers and the buzz of high society. He had meticulously planned this party to showcase his wealth and status, a perfect event to elevate his standing in the eyes of the elite. Yet, as the laughter faded into awkward whispers, a gnawing sensation of discomfort pulsed through him. The attention had turned back to Steve Harvey and Marjorie Bridges, who, despite his best efforts, remained the focal point of the evening. James's heart raced. He clutched his drink tighter, the icy glass contrasting starkly with the warm, humid air. The room, once his domain, felt alien, filled with guests whispering behind his back. He watched Steve and Marjorie share a quiet moment, their laughter resonating like a buoy in a turbulent sea. Suddenly the tension thickened, and James's arrogance transformed into a dull throb of anxiety. As the evening progressed, guests began to circulate, swapping stories and sparking conversations that only drew attention away from James's attempts to dominate the social scene. It seemed every laugh at Steve's expense was countered with a nod of solidarity towards the beloved couple. Even his closest friends were becoming uneasy, shooting him cautionary glances that deepened his unease. Among the guests was Vanessa, an old college friend of James, who had left the corporate world to pursue a more altruistic career in non-profit work. She observed the party from a distance, her brow furrowed in disapproval. James had always been the ambitious go-getter, but now he appeared fragile, too preoccupied with status to notice how he came across. Vanessa's own experiences with his arrogance flickered in her memory, incidents where he dismissed others to elevate himself. "Why are you acting this way, James?" she thought to herself, feeling increasing discomfort with each passing moment. She remembered their last encounter, where he had belittled her achievements over drinks, insisting that people only appreciated her because he had been generous enough to fund her organization's launch. Vanessa sighed, contemplating whether to interject or remain a silent observer. Meanwhile, James continued to swallow the tension, suppressing the growing discomfort churning in his gut. He approached the bar, desperately seeking a distraction in the form of another drink. As he poured himself another glass, he overheard snippets of conversation, words that made his heart race. Someone was discussing financial troubles, and the name Fuller echoed ominously in a corner. James turned sharply to see who was speaking, his pulse quickening at the sight of Barry, an old acquaintance who had once been the head of his financial team. They hadn't parted on good terms. Barry had left under dubious circumstances, and rumors of embezzlement had spiraled. James knew that Barry was still bitter, and with each passing moment, the weight of his secrets felt heavier. "Looks like the empire is crumbling," Barry remarked, loud enough for those nearby to hear. The hushed chatter around the bar grew louder, and James felt the heat rise to his cheeks. His pulse raced as he locked eyes with Barry, who smirked knowingly, reveling in the moment. "What a twisted version of a fairy tale this is turning out to be," Vanessa murmured under her breath, sensing the tension mounting. She hoped to intervene but hesitated, not wanting to exacerbate the situation. Yet the more she watched James's composure falter under Barry's scrutiny, the more she felt compelled to act. "Hey, James, everything okay?" she called out, forcing a smile onto her face as she approached him. James twisted around, his friendly demeanor momentarily replaced with an anxious frown. "It's nothing, just old news," he replied, his smooth voice failing to mask the tremor underneath. Vanessa frowned, picking up on the lie, sensing the threads of his carefully constructed facade fraying at the edges. As the evening wore on, James struggled to maintain the image he had projected. The laughter that had once welcomed him now felt like taunts, the whispers piercing through his bravado. Yet deep down, amidst the growing chaos, a flicker of self-awareness ignited within him. Perhaps tonight, he was destined to confront not just his guests but also the hidden truths he had long buried. The tension in the air thickened as James found himself at a crossroads. Barry sat at the bar, his mocking smile a reminder of the precariousness of his situation. It was a feeling James had grown accustomed to, the weight of expectations carried by those who had once looked up to him. But now, as Barry's jibes reverberated in his mind, James felt vulnerable. Instead of the lavish celebration he had envisioned, the party morphed into a battleground of ego and pride. In the expansive backyard, lavish decorations adorned the area, and the soft glow of string lights gave the ambiance a warm, inviting feel. Yet inside, James was engulfed in emotional turmoil. Guests swirled around him, laughter echoing, but each chuckle felt like another dagger to his chest. It was as if their amusement was at his expense, a collective judgment that he felt acutely. His thoughts were interrupted by a group of friends approaching him, their faces painted with concern. "James, you all right?" One of them, Greg, asked, his brow furrowed. "Yeah, just tired, I guess," James replied, forcing a smile. Greg's expression indicated he wasn't buying it, and James knew he could only maintain the charade for so long. "Might want to check on Barry. He's been talking for a while," Greg warned, glancing back toward the bar. James sighed, unsure of whether to confront Barry or retreat further into his facade. He took a deep breath and pivoted toward the bar, where Barry appeared to be holding court, a smirk plastered on his face as he continued to dig into other guests. As James approached, he caught snippets of conversation. "It's sad, really. Can you believe he pretended to be someone special?" Barry was proclaiming, gesturing grandly. The laughter that followed felt like a physical blow, igniting a fire of rage within James. "Why don't you pick on someone your own size?" James said, voice low but steady as he arrived at the bar. Barry turned, feigning surprise. "Oh, look, the knight in shining armor has arrived. What, did I strike a nerve, James? Didn't want the peasants to know how fragile your kingdom really is." The crowd went silent as they awaited James's reaction. Feeling the weight of their eyes, James clenched his fists, suppressing the urge to retaliate. Instead, he took a moment to gather his thoughts. "Is this really how you want to spend your evening? Dragging people down for your amusement?" James countered, calmer than he felt inside. Barry was unrelenting, leaning closer. "Maybe I'll drag you down with me. Your success is built on others' failures, isn't it?" Each word cut deeper, bringing to light James's lingering insecurities. The truth in Barry's taunts rang true, and he winced at how visible his struggles had become. But before he could respond, Vanessa appeared by his side, her presence a balm to his frayed nerves. "James, don't let him get to you. You've worked hard for what you have. He's just jealous," she urged, her eyes filled with unwavering support. "Jealousy doesn't seem like the issue," Barry chimed in, crossing his arms. "I think it's more about the charlatan hiding behind a mask of fame." The crowd murmured, the atmosphere growing tense. James could feel his heart racing, the weight of the night pressing down on him. It was as if the walls were closing in, leaving him at the mercy of his own emotions and the judgments of others. But within that moment of despair, James began to recognize the power within him, a spark igniting a determination he thought he'd lost. Perhaps it was time to confront not just Barry, but the version of himself he had allowed to grow complacent. He turned to Vanessa, nodding slightly, ready to reclaim his dignity. "I'm done hiding behind my success," he declared, his voice resonating with newfound clarity. "This is my life, and I won't let you or anyone strip that away." As he stepped away from the bar, he could sense the shift in the crowd. For the first time that evening, laughter transformed from taunts into something else. Curiosity. Barry's smirk faltered, and the anticipation for what James would do next electrified the atmosphere. The battle lines had been drawn, but for James, this was an opportunity to stand tall, embracing the tumult of the moment rather than shying away. Little did he know the revelation of his own shortcomings was about to surface with even greater intensity. The crowd's murmur faded into an electrifying silence as James stood, resolute at the center of the room, his heart pounding like a drum. Barry's dismissive grin faltered, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his features. This was it. James felt the power of the moment wash over him. In the dimly lit mansion, chandeliers glimmered as the laughter of the wealthy mingled with the strain of fine music. It should have been a celebration, but for James everything hung in the balance. The weight of Barry's insults clung to the atmosphere like an unwelcome guest, and for the first time, he didn't want to run or hide. He wanted to face the truth of who he was and all he'd allowed himself to become. "I'm done hiding behind my success," James announced, his voice steady and commanding. "I'm not a facade, I'm a person, and no one here can take that away from me." A ripple of intrigue swept through the guests. James could see the curious glances exchanged among the crowd. Some were impressed, others skeptical. But for him, each gaze felt like a little piece of armor, fortifying his resolve. Barry's smirk slipped further, replaced by a look of confusion, as if he was recalculating his approach. "Who do you think you are, coming here to preach about authenticity?" Barry scoffed, regaining his footing. "You're a joke, James. Just because you've got a bit of cash doesn't mean you're respected. It certainly doesn't mean you are valuable." James clenched his fists, the sting of Barry's taunt igniting a fire within him. He thought of the sacrifices he'd made to earn his wealth, the late nights and early mornings, the risks he had taken. "Respect is earned through character, Barry, not your bank account," he shot back, intensity rising in his voice. Around him, the mood shifted further, eyes widening in disbelief. "Character? Is that what you think you have?" Barry countered, venom creeping into his tone. "You're just another rich guy trying to buy himself a seat at the table, and I'm not impressed." But there was something different about James this time, an understanding that wealth wasn't just about money, but the authenticity of one's spirit. "It wasn't always like this for me," he admitted. "I've lost sight of who I really am, chasing this illusion of perfection. But I refuse to allow you to mock that journey anymore." Gary, an acquaintance who had remained in the shadows, stepped forward, seemingly intrigued. "James, are you really going to let him get to you? You've done well for yourself. You don't need to prove anything to anyone." The room held its breath, the tension palpable as Barry's eyes narrowed. "So you're going to play the victim? That's rich coming from you." James took a deep breath, feeling the heavy air thrum with emotions. "It's about more than just me. It's about being real in a world filled with pretenses. We've all faced challenges. Mine shouldn't be the punchline of your joke." Finally, something in him snapped. The resolve he'd built over the past moments crystallized into clarity. This was the moment that would set him on a path of authenticity he had long sought. "I'm not going to pretend anymore. I'm here, flawed, imperfect, and unapologetic. If you can't see the value in that, it's your loss, Barry." Gasps of surprise punctured the silence, and James could sense the crowd's shift, their murmurs now filled with intrigue rather than derision. Barry appeared momentarily taken aback, as if he'd been caught off guard by a counterattack he had never anticipated. It seemed as if the air within the posh mansion had shifted, allowing space for transformation. But just then, as if fate had orchestrated it all, a voice broke through the murmurings of the crowd. "Speaking of truth," a woman from the corner, elegant and poised, stepped forward. "Shall we delve into your truth, Barry? Perhaps the truth about your last investment blunder." Suddenly, the room buzzed with curiosity as the attention shifted. James faced Barry, who now looked cornered. The laughter simmered down as all eyes turned to witness the confrontation. Little did Barry know his own secrets were about to be revealed, and the tension of the party was about to escalate into a drama none had seen coming. James could feel the intensity in the room shift dramatically as the woman spoke up, her voice slicing through the tension like a knife. It was as if the elegant chandelier above them dimmed slightly, drawing everyone's gaze toward Barry, who stood in a strikingly exposed light. There was a palpable energy that crackled in the air, and James could sense that the spotlight had turned from him to the very man who had tried to belittle him moments ago. Barry's facade cracked little by little, the bravado he wore like a tailored suit now feeling uncomfortably tight. "What do you mean?" he stammered, his confident demeanor faltering. The crowd leaned in, eyes darting back and forth between the woman and Barry, captivated by the unfolding drama. The atmosphere was electric. Every person in the room felt like they were on the threshold of witnessing something monumental. James seized the moment, firing up his own confidence fueled by the unexpected support. He found himself moving several steps closer to Barry, feeling emboldened by the shift of the crowd's attention. "I think it's time we all learned what else this self-made millionaire has hidden in his closet," he said, his voice steady now, resonating with authenticity. The guests murmured in agreement, their eyes sparkling with anticipation. The woman's gaze met James's, and a flicker of gratitude passed between them. "You've built your empire on the backs of others, Barry. You've deceived people, lost millions while you lined your own pockets," she declared, her tone unwavering. "Tell them about your investment into that failing tech company, the one your buddy promised would be the next big thing. How many lives did you ruin with that lie?" A wave of gasps rippled through the room as Barry's expression shifted from outrage to vulnerability. The air had transformed, thick with revelations and the taste of retribution. James watched as the laughter from earlier morphed into shock, a collective realization settling among the guests. The very foundation of Barry's arrogance was being chipped away as the truth slowly emerged. "I think we deserve to hear the whole story," James interjected, a surge of righteousness pushing him forward. You think you can throw a party and make a fool out of us? You think we are all here just for the revelry? But it's your time to face the consequences of your actions. The tension in the room skyrocketed, a heavy weight that made everyone hold their breath. James felt a sense of purpose settle over him. It was no longer just about his humiliation. This was a reckoning, a moment for everyone present to reflect on the weight of their own stories, their own battles against the facades people put forth in their lives. Barry's face went pale, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. "This is ridiculous. You're all acting like children," he shouted, but his words fell flat, drowned out by the growing chorus of concerned murmurs from the crowd. The evening of glamorous excess had turned into something real and raw, a confrontation that seemed to echo deeply within the hearts of all present. Then, as all eyes remained fixed on the unfolding confrontation, James locked gazes with Barry, determined to dismantle the wall that the millionaire had built. "This isn't just about you, Barry. Your arrogance has real-world effects. While you were busy laughing at us, how many lives did you actually destroy? Do you even care?" James's voice rose, the unwavering tone resonating with empathy that surprised him. A mix of guilt and anger washed over Barry's features, but he couldn't hide the truth behind his eyes. The bluster faded slightly as the guests focused intently on him, eager for answers instead of dismissals. For the first time, he seemed uncertain. The atmosphere thickened, emotions spilled over like a glass filled to the brim. James could sense the anticipation, the collective hope that they would witness a moment of genuine honesty. Amidst the mounting tension, James took a deep breath. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about awakening a sense of accountability in Barry, and in all of them. The world had enough obscured truths, and tonight was about reclaiming sincerity, about recognizing that everyone has their own battles and flaws. "Let's be real," James said, the weight of his words heavy in the air. "We've all faced challenges. If we can't be honest with one another, then what's the point of relationships or even life?" The room fell silent, each person absorbing the gravity of his statement. As he spoke, James felt a surge of clarity. He was no longer the punchline in someone else's joke. He was the catalyst for change, not just for himself, but for everyone in that room. The collective silence lingered in the air, pregnant with anticipation, as eyes remained fixed on Barry. James felt the weight of the moment settle over the room. It was as if they were all holding their breath, waiting for the avalanche of truth to tumble forth. Barry, once a towering figure of extravagance and arrogance, now appeared vulnerable under the scrutinizing glares of his guests. "Do you really want to know?" Barry's voice quivered, faltering for the first time. The bravado that had once defined him began to crack, revealing the pressures he had long buried under layers of wealth and status. "I didn't set out to hurt anyone. I just wanted to be someone." James stepped closer, piercing into the delicate walls Barry had built around his insecurities. "Then be someone who cares. Recognizing your faults doesn't diminish your success. It humanizes you." Several guests shifted nervously, the extravagant decorations around them now feeling almost suffocating. Laughter and toasts had been replaced with introspection and discomfort. James could sense that the crowd was grappling with their own reflections in the unfolding drama. There was a shared realization that everyone had participated in this charade of wealth and status. The atmosphere transformed from tense animosity to a burgeoning empathy, drawing on their shared humanity. "Do you think your money can shield you from the consequences of your actions?" James pressed on, emboldened by the gravity of the moment. "So you built this opulent prison around yourself, but it's time to look through the bars and see the damage you've done." Barry's facade shattered like glass, the sharpness of the revelation cutting deep. His carefully curated life had been a smokescreen, drifting further from the man he had once been. "You don't understand, I wanted—" He hesitated, his voice catching on an unspoken confession. "I wanted to prove I was worth something." James's heart softened. "Your worth isn't tied to your bank account. It's about the people you choose to uplift rather than demean." For a heartbeat, silence enveloped them, allowing Barry's walls to crumble further. With an anguished expression, he looked around at his guests, once allies in his quest for validation, now witnesses to his perilous journey towards self-discovery. "I never realized how lonely I'd feel while at the top. I assumed success would fill the void, but it only magnified it. The gravity of his admission sent ripples through the crowd, the weight of his honesty breaking the tension that had once suffocated the room. Marjorie, standing slightly apart, felt a twinge of sympathy for Barry, seeing not just a wealthy man, but a lost soul desperate for connection. Feeling emboldened, she stepped forward. "We're all flawed, Barry, and honestly, it takes more strength to admit we're wrong than to flaunt our riches. You have the chance to make amends, to change the narrative." Barry met her gaze, the embers of hope igniting within him. "How do I start?" His voice trembled, the bravado fully stripped away, leaving behind a raw vulnerability. "Start by being present," James suggested. "Reach out to the people you've hurt. Offer your resources to uplift others, rather than to elevate your own status. Build bridges instead of walls." At that moment, something profound shifted within Barry. He realized that humility could be a form of strength, and in that realization lay the first step toward redemption. The guests around him felt the tension transform into a collective resolve. This was no longer just a confrontation, but a turning point for everyone in the room. As Barry took a tentative step back, he looked around at the faces of his guests, seeing them not as competitors, but as fellow travelers on this winding road of life. They were imperfect, struggling with their own burdens, and together they could foster a community rooted in genuine support rather than sour competition. "Thank you all for your patience and for being here," Barry said, his voice steadier now, each syllable laced with newfound authenticity. "I want to start this journey toward change for myself and for all of you." His words resonated, and James felt a rush of warmth as a sense of possibility filled the air. This wasn't just a moment of humiliation for Barry, it was an awakening, a catalyst for change. The guests began to murmur amongst themselves, their collective uneasy laughter transforming into encouragement, hope, and a vision of a collaborative future. As the tension melted away, James stood taller, feeling a sense of purpose blossom within him. This was a pivotal moment that would ripple outwards, inspiring those around him to embrace vulnerability and cultivate relationships built on honesty. The journey from here onward would not be easy, but it was a path worth taking. The atmosphere in Barry's lavish mansion had shifted dramatically. What began as a spectacle of wealth and competition had transformed into a moment of collective introspection. As the rich guests gathered in various cliques, the palpable tension that once filled the air replaced itself with a unifying warmth. Barry, still standing in front of everyone, could feel the weight of their eyes, no longer judging, but rather curious and hopeful. "Change won't come easy, but it's worth it," Barry continued, his voice gaining strength with every word. "I've lived in a bubble of arrogance for too long, thinking my wealth protected me from the struggles of others. Today I realize that true success isn't measured by the size of your bank account, but by the depth of your connections and the empathy you extend to one another." His guests listened, some nodding in agreement, others exchanging glances of surprise. Among them was James, who had initially come to the party with the intent to mock Barry, but now found himself reflecting deeply on the millionaire's words. The party that had spiraled into humiliation had unexpectedly turned into a heartening epiphany. James could hardly remember the last time someone in Barry's position displayed such vulnerability. As the night progressed, laughter replaced the earlier tension. Stories of struggle and resilience began to circulate among the guests. Quarterbacks turned motivational speakers, socialites who had dedicated their lives to mentorship, and philanthropists sharing tales of ambition and failure filled the evening air, creating an unexpected tapestry of camaraderie among those who had once viewed one another as rivals. The realization dawned on Barry. The party, meant to belittle, had morphed into a powerful gathering of shared experiences. Each individual, with their unique narratives, added a new layer of richness that money could never buy. The warmth of connection enveloped him, and for the first time in years, he felt truly seen. He approached James, who had been standing at the bar nursing a drink. "James," Barry said, his tone earnest, "I didn't expect someone like you to come over here and actually engage tonight." James felt a twinge of embarrassment, but also a burgeoning respect. "I had my reasons, Barry. But listening to your words, it's made me think. We're all just trying to get through life, aren't we?" "Exactly," Barry replied, the corners of his mouth lifting into a genuine smile. And this is just the beginning. I want to use my resources to build something meaningful. Will you help me? I'd be honored, James said, surprised but intrigued by the proposal. Maybe we can start an initiative together. You have the means, and I have the ideas. As the night wore on, Barry and James began sketching out their plans on a napkin, the atmosphere buzzing with possibility. They discussed mentorship programs for youths in their community, initiatives that would channel Barry's wealth into meaningful avenues, sparking passions and igniting dreams in others. The energy was electric, filled with hope that had blossomed from the ashes of humiliation. By the time the sun began to rise, the mansion was no longer a symbol of Barry's ego, but a beacon for transformation. The guests, once divided by status and wealth, now departed with a sense of unity and purpose. They had exchanged their competitive spirit for collaboration, each carrying a piece of Barry's revelation with them. As Barry stood by the window, watching them leave, he marveled at how a single night of vulnerability could shift the course of relationships. He felt lighter, more grounded, perhaps for the first time in his life. "Thank you," he whispered to the fading partygoers, knowing that their willingness to embrace change would pave the way for a brighter future. In hindsight, Barry understood that the real humiliation had never been about the public mockery, but rather a profound realization that in the quest for greatness, one must never overlook the human bonds that make life truly worthwhile. So what did you think of this story? Leave your comments, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, share with your friends, and don't forget to like. But most importantly, click the hype button. Seriously, this is crucial for the channel to grow and bring more amazing stories like this to you. It only takes a second, but it helps a lot. See you next time.